Greetings to everyone here today joining us with the Innovation Speaker Series. This is our May edition. The Atlantic Canada Climate Network is proud to co present this event alongside the Canadian Environmental Network. We've come together for this project to showcase cutting edge emergent technologies and their potential to advance climate solutions and create new
Go on this
opportunities.
one, Chris.
Before I begin, I would like to respectfully recognize that we have a wonderful relationship with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis across Canada with that have led with they have a relationship rather with the land that all Canadians live on and enjoy. And we would like to recognize here that the ACCN actually operates on that traditional unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqiyik, Passamaquoddy, Penobscot, and Abenaki nations, or the Wabanaki Confederacy, as well as Inuit and Inuit peoples. And when I say relationships are very reciprocal. So it's very important that we as settler Canadians respect and harbor this relationship. This territory is covered by treaties of peace and friendship. These nations first signed these treaties with the British Crown in 1726, but these treaties did not deal with the surrender of land and resources, but in fact, established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between nations. So it's in this spirit of peace and friendship that I greet you all today. It also reminds us that each of these 634 different First Nations communities, 53 Inuit communities, and 8 Métis settlements rather across Canada have a unique historical, cultural, spiritual, and environmentally sustainable connection to the land that their people and ancestors have inhabited since time immemorial. And when it comes to relationships, we encourage all Canadians and visitors to this land to learn about and regularly acknowledge the historic and current relationships that exist between the unceded land on for which we live and work, and of course with the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities. We also encourage all Canadians to consider how they personally contribute to Canada's reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. With that, the Innovation Speaker Series aims to foster collaboration and knowledge exchange amongst diverse stakeholders passionate about addressing climate change. So today we welcome Rupinder. Rupinder is an absolutely wonderful person. Rupinder Kaur is the community outreach coordinator for NetZero Atlantic. She's going to help us delve into the basics of geothermal energy and its diverse applications in Cape Breton and throughout Nova Scotia, including NetZero Atlantic's GeoCAT project, that's Geothermal Capacity Assessment and Training Program, shedding light on their mission and initiatives. But a bit about Rupinder, she's a dedicated professional with a passion for promoting renewable energy and fostering community engagement. She holds a Bachelor of Engineering Technology in Petroleum from Cape Breton University, CBU, and she brings a solid foundation in energy systems to her role. She joined NetZero Atlantic in July of 2023 as a community outreach coordinator in partnership with I want to say this right, Verschuren Centre.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely sure I butchered it, but yay for me for trying. But really, Rupinder has been instrumental in establishing connections with local climate groups and raising awareness about geothermal energy in Cape Breton communities. Her efforts align with the organization's mission to promote renewable energy and foster collaboration towards a net zero future by 2050 in Atlantic Canada. We're very excited and hold so much gratitude for Rupinder and her colleague Joe for being here with us and all of Net Zero Atlantic for helping the ACCN in our mission to amplify the work that's happening and engage and educate Atlantic Canadians. So, with that, it's my wonderful pleasure to send it over to you, Rubinder.
Thanks, Ashley. So wonderful introduction and welcome everyone for our NetZero's GeoCAT session. I'm excited to have you all with us today for NetZero Atlantic's GeoCAT session today. Huge thanks to Atlantic Canada Climate Network and a wonderful project that they have started, Climate Reality Project Canada, through which we are hosting our session today. Huge thanks to Ashley Anthony for supporting us to host this event webinar for everyone. I will quickly share my screen over to delve into our presentation today. As Ashley mentioned, I'm a community outreach coordinator for NetZero Atlantic's GeoCAT project. I joined NetZero Atlantic last year in July 2023. My work involves community engagement about to introduce the geothermal energy project to Cape Breton communities and spreading the word about geothermal technology and really getting building capacity for this project among Cape Breton communities specifically. So our project is GeoCAT, which is Geothermal Research Capacity Building Assessment and Training Program. And I will go over the presentation, but before that, I will introduce Joe Collier. He's the project manager of this project, and he will go over NetZero Atlantic's bit about introduction about who we are and what we do. So Joe, you can take the stage.
Thanks very much, Rupinder. Yeah, just a very quick introduction about NetZero Atlantic. My name's Joe Collier. I'm a project manager with NetZero Atlantic based out of Halifax. For those of you that don't know, NetZero Atlantic is a not-for-profit group that focuses on enabling Atlantic Canada's energy transition to net zero, primarily through providing applied research and project management support. For geothermal in particular, we're focused on addressing knowledge gaps that may exist around the technology or the potential of geothermal resources in Nova Scotia and across Atlantic Canada. And we've been funded by the federal government, the Smart Renewables and Electrification Pathway Program, to deliver a capacity building project that Rupinder is presenting on today.
Thanks, Joe, for the great introduction. Now I will get into the heart of the presentation. So as Joe already mentioned, like we are filling those gaps of knowledge for communicating this project to the whole Cape Breton-based communities. We are here to introduce the geothermal energy project in Cape Breton and how it carries potential as an energy source towards heating and cooling. So if anybody from the audience has questions, concern, and feedback, feel free to put the comment in the chat section. We can go over the questions and concern at the end of presentation. Me and Ashley can go through the comments in the end. So quickly, I will go over the key contents we have for the presentation, key points I will be discussing over. So first, the introduction about geothermal energy, what actually geothermal energy is, and what are the different types of, why geothermal energy, and how it differs from all other technologies like solar and wind, and some of the use cases and applications, some cost side and financial and economic side of the project and how much cost associated with it, and how much Cape Breton has potential in terms of geothermal and some of the existing projects in Nova Scotia and Cape Breton. And with conclusion, I will go over some contact details, how you can get involved with us and the project. So what is actually geothermal energy? So geothermal energy is nothing but the process that we harness from Earth's mantle layer to the surface to use toward different applications. So it's the energy that we get from the Earth's mantle layer to the surface to use it towards different applications, such as for residential heating, for commercial heating. As we can look at the diagram, we have different numbers here, which represent 10 Celsius, 25 degrees Celsius. So as we go deeper and deeper down, we have higher temperatures, and the shallow surface, we have lower temperatures. So depending on that, you can see in the diagram, we have different applications such as agriculture, drying, greenhouse heating, residential heating, and power generation. So as the layers suggest, so areas have different geothermal gradients. Gradient means nothing but the degree Celsius that we gained per surface of the kilometer of that area. So geothermal gradient is different for different regions in Cape Breton, such as Sydney River. So it has different geothermal gradient, or Sydney Mines, it has different geothermal gradient. So likely it differs for different areas. And also the year-round demand is ideal as this is below the surface. So geothermal energy is always renewable, it's stable all the time as it's below the Earth's surface. So with that, how geothermal energy, like how it's getting generated beneath the earth, so that we first have to understand what the process of conduction is. Conduction is a process is is nothing but when the heat energy travels from heater, like hotter surface to the cooler surface. So it is a process. So as we can see, like the rainwater is getting collected here above the surface of geothermal energy layer. The aquifer or the water body is getting heated up from the heat that's coming from that geothermal energy core. And that hot aquifer is our geothermal energy aquifer is. We can harness that energy with the help of drilling into the rock or into the water aquifer to use towards like district heating or commercial heating or residential heating. So this is how, with the conduction process, when the heat energy moves from the core of from the mantle of the earth surface to the shallow surface. So that is how the geothermal energy is getting generated. And then we have to understand what are the different types and systems, how we can derive that geothermal energy to the surface and then to the residential building and the commercial building. So first, I will start with the left of the diagram here with the open loop GSHP array, which means when we are drawing the aquifer water with the two pipes with the open piping system. It's the process when we draw hot water to the house to distribute heat energy inside the residential building. And as we move next towards closed loop GSHP array, is the similar concept to open loop system, but the difference is instead of drawing directly water inside the building, we are using boreholes to like draw the heat energy. But here we are not drawing any water to the surface, but rather than we are using boreholes to heat these boreholes, like so that the heat energy can be drawn. So the only difference is in the open loop, we are directly drawing water to the surface, but in terms of closed loop, we are not drawing any water, but rather we are drawing the heat energy with the use of pipes by drawing into the ground. So as you can see, here we have to use like 4 boreholes instead of 2 pipes, and the temperature is pretty higher in terms of direct drawing the water. In terms of like closed loop, it's only 10 to 14 degrees Celsius, which means we are drawing less energy in terms of closed loop. Next, moving on towards the mine water heating energy system, which means, as the name suggests, we are drawing mine water to get the heating energy to the residential or commercial heating system. As it has like higher temperature, which means any of the abandoned mines or operational mines, if the mine is in operational, it's functional, we can draw the mine water to the surface to use towards district heating or many other applications. As the temperature number suggests, it has 25 degrees Celsius, which is quite higher than open loop and closed loop system, which means as the water seeps deeper and deeper, the temperature is raising again and again. So that means the temperature is really higher because the rock that are surrounding the mines are really at the depth. As we move on towards the mid-depth potential, which means hydrothermal system, which is our major focus of this GeoCAT project, which means looking over the mid-depth around 2,000 meter to 5,000 meter, which can draw really good heat temperature, which is around 60 degrees Celsius, or could be greater than that, depending on the geothermal gradient of that specific region. We can use it towards commercial heating or district heating or residential heating. So which means we are directly drawing the heat from the mid-depth aquifer to the surface. The last but not least is the electricity generation with the enhanced geothermal system, which means fracturing the rock to get the higher temperature. It's the greater than 130 degrees Celsius, which is like very, very, very higher temperature. So granite intrusion means the massive amount of rocks which are available in the core of the earth, which means a very high temperature rocks. So in the countries like USA and Germany, so these kind of countries, they have enhanced geothermal system. They use it for power generation, for electricity generation, They have pretty higher temperatures, but that's not the scope of our projects, but we only focus on mid-depth potential. I'll quickly go over what are some applications involved with the geothermal systems. I will start with the greenhouse heating. So as the temperature suggests, like 40 to 80 degrees Celsius, we have potential of 60 degree. We can warm up the soil or heat up the space that's inside the greenhouse, or we can warm up the water for aquacultures. We can warm up the agriculture crops. We can use it for forestry drying. We can use it for 40 to 150 degrees Celsius district heating, either for commercial or for residential. It has application for swimming and spa heating. So it has various applications depending on the gradient and depending on all other conditions. I will go over the geothermal uses in specifically in agriculture areas, like the temperature that's below 60 degrees Celsius, which is mid-depth potential. It has applications in greenhouses, like warming up the soil or aquaculture heating or food processing. Anywhere lies between like milk pasteurization or drying up soil or drying up the grains. So specifically, it has broad applications in agriculture sector. Now the question is like, why geothermal is like different from all other technologies? We have solar, we have wind, we have tidal energies. So why geothermal is different? The very first reason is it's reliable. Why it's reliable? Because it's underneath the earth. It's untouchable. It's not depending on the climate factors. It's not depending on sun energy. It's not depending on any sunlight and tidal energies or wind energy. So it's independent of all the external or weather factors. It's renewable because it's getting generated again and again. It's renewable, of course, and space efficient. It's not using acres of lands. So it's space efficient. It can use only tiny food squares if we want to have geothermal systems. It's 24/7 available. So it's underneath earth, it's stable all the time. So it has low operational and maintenance cost, which means unlike air source heat pumps, so geothermal energy doesn't require any electric resistance or backup, because we are already having higher temperatures at the earth's surface. So we not require any other electric resistance backup or any extra energy. So that is why it has low energy consumption. So that means the cost of operations and maintenance are very low. So advantages of geothermal, what are some benefits of geothermal? The first one is land use. As I mentioned before, we are not using any acres of land. Like solar, they are using like 4,300 acres per gigawatt to generate electricity. In terms of wind offshore, they are using like 1,400 acres, and somewhere for geothermal, it's very, very, very less. You can see the tiny like footprint here is very less, which is 47 acres for geothermal. So that showcase the land use for geothermal is very minimum. As I mentioned before, the low operational and maintenance cost. So geothermal energy does consume very less energy. So it does have very low operational and maintenance cost. In terms of water reuses, so the same water that's we draw at the surface, it's getting back to the ground, and we are drawing same water at the surface. So that means water we are re-injecting again to the ground to get the heat energy. So water is not wasted here. GHG emissions, I would not say it's 0%. I would say it's very, very less in comparison to conventional fuels like fossil fuels, natural gas and propane and all other conventional fuels. So it does have GHG emission, but it has low, very, very less GHG emission as comparison to other fuels. So what is the cost that comes with the geothermal? So geothermal is very highly costly project. It's like it does have very high installation cost, because the thing is we have to drill deeper down to get the heat energy. So generally the cost is like $1,000 per meter, and that would be 1 million for 1 kilometer for drilling that much deeper. And all other costs that brings with it is the piping cost and pipelines, drawing construction and heat exchangers. All other costs that comes with it is like excluding the drilling cost. And if we want to make the project successful, we need to have a successful aquifer and as well as the energy demand. For example, if an aquaculture does have the ideal energy demand, which means that is the best customer for geothermal, because they have like ideal energy demand. And the geothermal project have longer lifespans, which means they can go longer, and they can payback period will be 12 to 20 years. It lies between that. If we do the cost structuring, so 10% of the project goes to evaluation and the rest 80% goes to delivery, which means laying down the construction lines and infrastructure and doing the producing the heat energy network for the buildings, laying down the pipelines and heat exchangers and all those things. And 5% goes in permitting, which means getting permissions and getting surveys done, and 5% on the designing thing. So overall, the cost is really higher, but in terms of operational and maintenance cost, that is very low in terms of geothermal. So next one is the geothermal map. So this study was done in 2020 by Department of Natural Resources in partnership with NetZero Atlantic. This data was evaluated from the existing petroleum wells. So these are not like latest data or anything, because no new wells have been dug. So this data is pretty old, and we can see from the tiny dots here, all of the province we have geothermal potential, and this map was evaluated accordingly. And we can see like the darker shades of purple here and the middle shade of the purple here, which represent the potential of geothermal energy with the higher temperatures. So the darker shade of the purple represent the higher geothermal temperature ranges, which means greater than 60 degrees Celsius. And the middle shade of the geothermal represent the mid-depth potential, which means somewhere lies between 20 to 60 degrees Celsius, greater than 3 kilometers, which means if we drill down to 3 kilometers or greater than that, we can retrieve temperature somewhere between 20 to 60 degrees Celsius. And the tiny dots here represent the temperature that is the geothermal gradient of that surface, which means if we drill like 1 kilometer, we can retrieve 20 to 25 degrees Celsius. And if we go like 2 kilometers, which will be double of that 22 geothermal gradient. As we move towards the existing projects in Cape Breton and Nova Scotia, we have like pretty good history in geothermal. We have Spring Hill Mine, which is Cumberland County's Spring Hill project. And it was world's first project that has been successfully exploited in terms of mine heating. So they like exploited heating energy with the capacity of 400,000 meter cubic of mine water. And the surface temperature was recorded 18 degrees Celsius, and they are using it for heating up their school and their around businesses. They have some really cool businesses around like pizza stores, and they have schools that surround the building, and some like national parks and geothermal business park here. So that's a pretty fantastic project that we can see existing in Nova Scotia. And like similar model could be developed in Cape Breton areas as well, as we are like familiar with the mining history of Cape Breton. So we have Sydney mines, we have New Waterford, we have all other places to explore. So existing projects in Cape Breton, we have a list of all the projects that's existing in Cape Breton we can take examples of. We have Amera Centre, we have Verschuren Centre, the place I'm working on, Bayplex Recreation Centre, Membertou Centre, that is the Sports Centre of Member 2, Canadian Coast Guard College, and we have Centre of Discovery and Innovation, and we have Port Hawkesbury Civic Centre, we have Tech First Nation Community Greenhouse. So I will go over the first example, Member 2 Sports Centre, which is 1,000 feet square of the area, with the sports facility and also the walking space and the ice rink system. So how they are using geothermal, so during the ice making process, so much of the heat energy is getting like dissipated, so they are storing that heat energy with the geothermal inside the ground, and that same energy is they are using it for like heating school, heating up the walking area, heating up the sports center. So they are like managing the like energy efficiency overall. And also the Canadian Coast Guard College, they are using liquid source heat pump, which is like working similar to geothermal, and they are drawing seawater for heating up that pool area for the students. And also they have like very like fancy energy efficient technologies. They have fan drives and like VFDs, cool drives, to like maintain the temperature inside that pool area. And also like sports center. We have First Nation Tech Community Greenhouse. They have installed in-house ground heating system and the climate batteries, which is similar concept to geothermal, and it's not like fully geothermal, it's similar to geothermal, which works like during the daytime, the climate batteries, they're storing geothermal energy, like sunlight energy into it, and during the nighttime, it distributes the heating energy to the whole space for the greenhouse. So it works very similar to geothermal. So these are the wonderful examples that exist in Cape Breton, and we can think of other examples as well, and we can model similar projects in Cape Breton as well. Yeah, so at last I will conclude my presentation. Yeah, so geothermal energy represents significant potential for heating in Nova Scotia, either for residential, either for commercial buildings. So Cape Breton's mid-depth geothermal potential could support different applications like greenhouses, like ice rink facilities, as we mentioned before, like Member 2's ice rink system. We have Phototex a community greenhouse, and we have aquacultures. We could use it for heating the district. And also the geothermal energy is reliable. Why it's reliable? Because it's underneath, it's stable, it's 24/7 renewable, it's available all the time, independent of external factors. It's not depending on any weather conditions. And we have coal mining history in Nova Scotia. So that gives us opportunity to, explore more opportunities, as we have seen in Spring Hill Mine project. So there is a history of coal mines in Nova Scotia that could be assessed further to integrate with the district heating network. We have geothermal, which is having a high installation cost, but it does have very low operational and maintenance cost, which can decrease over time. So there is an opportunity for us to explore geothermal in Nova Scotia. And with that, I would say here's a potential of geothermal in Nova Scotia, but at the provincial level, we need to reassess it. We need to analyze it further to ensure that project is viable and it's financially viable and it's like feasible. So if anybody has any question, any comments, they can put in the chat box, and I can go over the slides if anybody wants.
Rupinder, what a great presentation. I just learned honestly so much, and I thought that I was even knowledgeable on this, and now look at me. So grateful for you being here. I have a few questions that I've written down here. The first thing that you talked about was geothermal gradients. Now, you did say that this in Nova Scotia has been determined through old defunct mines or flooded mines. How is that actually evaluated when you're looking at geothermal in a place that doesn't have maybe a mining history?
So yeah, as I mentioned, like for the evaluation of the map, we have different petroleum wells that existed like long time ago. So that map data that existed, it's like the retrieved from the petroleum wells data. So that's not from the mines data. So yeah.
Is there like a correlation between the ability to drill for petroleum and the viability for geothermal potential?
Yes, I think Joe can answer that question.
I can definitely jump in a bit. Yeah, Rupinder, that's a good answer. But maybe about the point that you made, Ashley, about sort of areas where this exploration hasn't happened. There's definitely other ways that you can assess for geothermal feasibility. On the one hand, what you can do is you can do geophysical work, which is basically using physics and fancy scientific instruments without drilling to get some insight into what's going on beneath the ground. If you have geoscientists geoscientists would have the knowledge to be able to make some infer some information here. But generally what has to happen, and also what will have to happen in Nova Scotia for any mid-depth geothermal project, is at some point you'll get to the point where you have to drill a test well that will be able to give you really accurate temperature readings. And the other kind of the missing piece right now in this research that the province and NetZero Atlantic has done together using this existing data is we have a fairly decent idea of the temperature gradients that we need to validate, but we're not sure what the water flow rates are like below the ground. And so say if you're drawing water up from an aquifer a few kilometers below the ground, how quickly that water will recharge or sort of warm up again. These things weren't really, it's not data that was collected by oil and gas wells back in the day. So you'd need dedicated geothermal test wells to get that information.
That's all so very interesting. Something that came up in the chat here was that you mentioned the cost of setting up a system is very costly. Is it safe to assume that it's cost prohibitive to set up individual home geothermal and that it would be more applicable to communities or commercial customers instead?
Do you want to take that, Rupinder?
Sure. Can you repeat the question again? I think I missed it.
So if it costs a lot to initially put this in place, is it safe to assume that it is prohibitive so that it is harder to access for individual, say like homeowners, and that the real potential would be in like community investment or commercialized investment? So those would be the main targets of people who could institute geothermal potential?
Yeah, definitely. Like we can like look over other provinces in Montreal. They have installed community district heating network projects where they have, they collectively have involved government bodies and as well as like community of that region. So we can say like the commercial point of view, community projects are like more viable than the residential one.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, that makes sense. When we're talking about communities, this is something that kind of just came up in my head as you guys were speaking. There is and I apologize if this is polarizing or if this is a topic of discomfort. But in Hawaii, they are talking about geothermal potential and how it is against the Native Hawaiians' cultural viewpoints, tapping into the earth and into that heating potential that they would view as a divine gift. Have you had any cultural pushbacks from Indigenous communities in Canada that you've talked to about geothermal potential? Or
I
do
can
you know
answer
of
that.
any?
Sure.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And part of the work that we're trying to do with this project. It's a capacity building project and getting the word out about geothermal, but also learning about, yeah, not only knowledge gaps, but also how people perceive geothermal and if it's appropriate for communities and Mi'kmaq communities in Nova Scotia and across Atlantic Canada. I think, you know, generally speaking, Mi'kmaq communities are such strong stewards of the land that they're on, and there's a lot of concern, and also looking back at history, how settlers have mismanaged the land. So there can be a lot of skepticism about new technologies, and geothermal is no different. Where I haven't heard anything sort of, you know, along the lines of what you mentioned in Hawaii. I know that there is concern. I mean, mid-depth geothermal projects can be massive projects drilling many kilometers below the ground, and in some ways share a lot of technology that oil and gas do as well. It's not extracting fossil fuels, but you're still drilling these holes, and there are still environmental risks. I was at a community event in GeoCAT back in the fall and talking about the project, and I mentioned how the water that's coming up to the surface is considered brine because it's got so many dissolved salts from the earth. And one of the women in the community said that it's kind of a triggering word because of the history of Alton gas in the province and the risk of brine and how it could impact wetlands and other environments. I don't want to stop using that word because it's the reality of the geothermal projects. And I do think, you know, there are responsibly managed geothermal projects across the world where you can really minimize the risk of things like flooding at the surface and seismicity as well. But like any project, you have to make sure you have people on board who can do a really diligent job of building and managing that risk. So we want to be like transparent about that and also record any feedback or any pushback about the technology, because that's really important.
Thank you for that answer. I really appreciate that. That was a really great one. We also talked about environmental effects. Something that you went through in your presentation was granite intrusion. I'm wondering, because you actually used the word, like, I believe it was fracking that you used, and we've obviously determined that there are great similarities between geothermal potential and oil and gas exploration. I'm wondering if you could go into a bit of this granite intrusion, like how that works, and maybe if there are any environmental effects or opportunities to negate environmental effects from that.
Sure. Yeah, so granite means the massive rock that has massive heating capacity. So that lies inside the core earth surface. So that's like very, very deep. That's like goes beyond like 5,000 meters and like could be deeper than that too. So to like break down that rock, so we like inject different type of fluids into that rock. So like in the drilling, we do that with the perforated pipes with that, like the pipes that has holes in it. And then we do like injection of like chemical and acidic liquid to break that rock to get the heat energy. So in the petroleum side, we do that to like, you know, access fossil fuels and to retrieve like oil and natural gas. But in terms of like geothermal, in countries like USA, as I mentioned, like in Germany, they are already doing this process to get the heat energy from the granite intrusion, which is called as enhanced geothermal system for power generation, because that temperature is really higher. It's like greater than 150 degree or 130 degrees Celsius. But in Nova Scotia, we have like regulations that's against fracturing, and we are not, this project is out of scope and we are not supporting EGS, which is enhanced geothermal systems. So yeah, our focus is only like mid-depth potential. So we're not focusing on fracturing. Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification. I'm sure that there are environmentalists out there that the hackles are going down. Something that you just mentioned as well was brine. Now, that word is an interesting topic in itself because of its potential for road salt alternatives. Would the brine that could possibly come from geothermal activity or geothermal projects be used for maybe something as simple as like a road salt alternative? Or would it have too many, carcinogenic or detrimental chemicals in it that it would cause a negative effect?
Yeah, it's a cool idea. I'd never heard about say sort of filtered brine from geothermal being used as a road salt alternative. I think off the bat, I would say it's generally because there can be heavy metals that are dissolved in the water, and it's brine is really, rather than just say like sodium chloride salt that we would think of, or whatever the salt is in road salt, it's a real mix of chemicals from the geology of the earth that have dissolved into the water. So it's generally it needs to be filtered at some point, and it wouldn't be safe, I think, for using as road salt. So definitely any geothermal project, you don't want to have that water that you're extracting from the earth really have any sort of interface with anything at the surface. As you draw the water up, we have heat exchangers which extract the heat without actually taking from the water itself, and then use that in like a district heating loop. So there's no risk, say, of like a pipe bursting in someone's home and it's this ancient water from deep below the earth that could potentially be poisonous. It would be clean water in that loop. But yeah, so probably not for road salt.
Interesting. Again, learning so much from all of this. Thank you for all of the information. You did say that this isn't like an emissions-free project as well, that there are emissions that are associated with this. I'm wondering if you could detail some of where those emissions would come from and if there's opportunity for reductions in these emission potentials and what they could be.
Sure, I can go over that question. So like GHG emissions that comes, the very first will be like drilling. That is the major like transportation and mobilization of the equipments and laying down the infrastructure, because for the drilling also we need build infrastructure and a major plan for the drilling. That comes with the GHG emissions, and also with the transportation of the equipments to install the geothermal system. And yeah, to mitigate those emissions, I would say like proper assessments and proper like project plan and reassessments of the project plan would be a good idea to mitigate those like risks.
Once the project is instituted, is there ongoing emissions after are those emissions directly tied to like heavy machinery, or is it more of like operational emissions?
There are some operational emissions. I think approximately it's about 1/6 that of natural gas, mainly for the running of pumps and other pieces of equipment. That could certainly be reduced depending on sort of the source of power for those things. So in Nova Scotia right now, if we're using coal for electricity for a large portion of our electricity, but say if we were using a renewable source instead, then the emissions would be much less.
Wonderful. So, yeah, as we continue with the electrification of our systems and of our energy production, what you're saying is that there is the opportunity for reduction in emissions that come from net zero or from geothermal energy potential as well. So, as we kind of do the whole system, this is going to clean up as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Wonderful. I just have a couple more questions. I swear. I was writing them down as you guys were going through. Other provinces. Has NetZero Atlantic explored this type of conversation in other regions in Atlantic Canada, or do they not have the same potential as Nova Scotia? Did you focus on Nova Scotia because of its extractional history?
I can speak to that as the project manager. Certainly, there's potential in other provinces in Atlantic Canada. This project was really set up in collaboration with the Nova Scotia provincial government, specifically the Department of Natural Resources and Renewables, who are really interested to see how geothermal could potentially be developed responsibly in the province. So yeah, we're sort of focusing on potential in Nova Scotia, but there are some interesting projects going on in New Brunswick, and we're interested in Newfoundland, Labrador, and potentially PEI as well. Although I haven't heard much about geothermal and PEI. One other thing to mention, just back to Andrew's question about the costs of geothermal for community versus an individual residence. At the scale of an individual residence, certainly like drilling to the depth of 3 kilometers for mid-depth, extremely cost prohibitive, but ground source heat pumps, which can go, anywhere from like just a few meters to like around 50 meters below the ground, those could be viable for an individual residence. And for the most part, they can be deployed anywhere across Atlantic Canada. You'd need experienced contractors and people who understand a bit of the geology in your area to work on those projects, but it can be scaled back to an individual level as well.
And this leads perfectly into my next question and my final question. How would municipalities best prime themselves for being ready for geothermal potential? If this is something that they are interested in, if they want to get off the coal hop, if you will, like what do they need to do policy-wise, infrastructure-wise, and community-wise to best be well positioned to take on a geothermal opportunity if it comes available?
I can answer that, and maybe Rupinder, you can pitch in too, since you've been doing a lot of the engagement in Cape Breton. But I would say what we're trying to do with this project, and what I think the first step is for municipalities, is to recognize that this is an option and what it can be applied to. Typically, geothermal is sort of viewed more as a niche thing, whereas wind and solar and battery storage are much more sort of in the public eye. So we want to sort of talk about the applications where geothermal can be used, the kinds of customers that would be ideal, say for mid-depth, where you want kind of like year-round usage at a fairly high rate of heating. And then communities can say, okay, maybe if there's a housing development that we're planning on building, and we have promising geothermal potential, we can look into doing a feasibility study here to see if we can have a mid-depth district heating system for this housing project. Or maybe it's not mid-depth, maybe it will be more ground source heat pumps and things like that. I think those are the first steps. There can certainly be challenges with sort of setting up who's going to be the provider of heat and how it's sort of perceived as kind of like a utility, really. And there's a lot of permitting work, but I think the first step is just having geothermal have a bit of like presence in people's minds and how it could be set up for future projects with housing developments or greenhouses or business parks close to mines and things like that. What do you think, Rupinder? Is there anything you would add there?
Yeah, definitely. Like they have like a long like idea to say into it. Like as we move towards the phase two involves the project like talking to mayors and then councillors and taking their feedback, like what they think about it, and really like making a project module for all the businesses and the facilities that could be customers of geothermal, and then really like developing a module for them so that they can walk through the module and they can see, okay, what requirements do I need to have to have geothermal systems. And for that we are in process to talk to mayors and all the municipalities.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I know that there was also a training part about the GeoCAT project. Can we this I promise will be my last one. Can we talk about the training model and what your ambitions are with that in the project?
Yeah, for sure. There's kind of two elements to the training. Um, as the project manager of this project, who sort of came on halfway through, the first step was to bring on board community liaisons in all of the areas of Nova Scotia and Mi'kmaq communities in Nova Scotia too, where this potential exists, and train these community liaisons on basically what geothermal is, how we can talk about it with the public, and some of the opportunities that are there, and how to engage with the public as well. So I've been working with Rupinder and other community liaisons across the province to sort of build that up, and also learning a lot as I go. Rupinder alluded to the phase 2 of this project, which is kind of a training thing as well, where if we find people in either organizations, municipalities, or other sort of in those decision-making roles who are really keen on looking into how they can advance geothermal opportunities in their communities. We have like a project development module that I guess will sort of, it's a bit of a training module too, where we walk through the different steps of a process, of the process of setting up a geothermal project, and what you need to be aware of along the way. Neither Rupinder and myself are like, geotechnical experts on this, but we know enough to sort of walk people into the project development stage and connect them with resources where they can learn more.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Rupinder. Thank you, Joe. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we say goodbye to you?
Thanks very much for having us. I'm not sure if there's any other questions from folks in the chat here, but if definitely feel free to reach out if there's anything you're interested in. And yeah, maybe Rupinder, if you had anything.
Yeah, no, anything. If there is any question in the chat section that's left, we are happy to answer that question. And also, the website link is here, netzeroatlantic.ca, and you can search like geothermal NetZero Atlantic. You will land on the page of geothermal energy to get more information about our project or session that's going on. Yep.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much. And we're very grateful for you being here with us today in the Atlantic Canada Climate Network. It was a brilliant presentation. Again, I know that I'm not the only one that's learned a lot here. I appreciate your time and your efforts.
Thanks so